And then Lance replies, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" And Tyler says, "I am, I'm sorry."
He looks up at the judge. He doesn't cry. And somewhere in that courtroom, Erica Kirk is sitting there, listening to her husband's last hours read out loud from a phone screen. You already know what I'm about to say. You fed it the second this case started making headlines. Something about this whole thing never sat right with you. Not the shooting. Not the arrest. The way it was handled after. This week, a Utah courtroom finally cracked open the evidence against Tyler Robinson, the young man accused of killing Charlie Kirk in front of thousands of people at Utah Valley University. And for the first time, we're not getting a press release. We're not getting a talking point. We're getting testimony. Real testimony under oath from the people who were actually there. And here's the thing, though. What came out of that courtroom this week wasn't just evidence. It was a window into exactly how fragile the truth becomes the moment it passes through the hands of institutions we're told to trust blindly. Stay with me here. Because by the end of this, you're going to have questions. Real ones, not the kind the news wants you to have. Let's start where it started. September 10th, 2025. Turning Point, USA.
So Charlie Kirk was sitting underneath this white TP USA tent on September 10th, 2025 in a large open area of the Utah Valley campus in Orem. Thousands of people had gathered to hear him debate people in the crowd about, politics, social issues. But during one of those questions, a gunshot rang out. Gunshot hit Kirk, sparked pandemonium. You know the videos. I'm sure you've seen them. He was rushed to a hospital. He didn't survive. He left behind his wife, Erica Kirk, and 2 children. In the panic after that shot rang out,
A white tent. Thousands of people gather to hear Charlie Kirk do what he always did, sit down and debate anybody who wanted to challenge him. That was his whole thing. He didn't hide behind security. He didn't dodge hard questions. He sat in the open and let people come at him. And that openness, that willingness to stand in front of a crowd and just talk, that's what got him killed. A single shot just after 12:20 in the afternoon. One officer, Christopher Bagley, testified he heard the crack, saw Kirk lean to the side, and then the whole courtyard turned into chaos. People running, people screaming. Officers scrambling downstairs while others tried to climb up.
What happened? What did you see and what did you hear?
I heard an individual talking to Charlie, and I happened to kind of glance over the edge of the railing about that time. I could see the right side of Charlie's shoulder, so not his whole body, because he was underneath the tent, so I could only see probably the right side of his body. He was answering a question, kid asked him a question, and then I heard a shot fired.
Do you know what time that was?
Yes.
What time was that?
12:23.
What did you see?
At that moment, I saw him lean to the left, so
When you say him, you see
Charlie.
Charlie?
Charlie Kirk. So I saw him go to the left because I could no longer see the right side of his body. So he went further underneath the tent to the north side of the tent, so left.
Okay. Can you describe the reaction of others that were there?
Yeah, so then everybody started getting up and starting to run in more of a chaos kind of situation. At that moment, I recognized it as gunfire. I left my post, which was right there on the south end of the hall flags. I proceeded to right where the Fugle and the hall flags meet. There's some outside stairs that I was starting to run down. As I was trying to get down to the bottom of the stairs, people are running up, people are laying down on the steps. I'm trying to jump over people to get to the bottom of the stairs so I can help stop an individual that's probably shooting.
What happened next?
By the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, I was informed on the radio that we had a shooter in custody. So I thought, at that moment, I was like, oh, that was kind of fast. Obviously, it was closer range probably because we had an individual in custody. Another officer came on and said we had an individual in custody. So I decided to, since the threat is gone, now I can assess for anybody that's injured and start looking for any medical needs that's needed at that moment.
Nobody knew where the shot came from. Nobody knew if there was a second shooter. Nobody knew anything. And in that fog, in that panic, here's what actually happened. 2 people got grabbed. 2. Neither one of them was the shooter. One was a 70-something-year-old man who allegedly shouted something about being the one who did it. Another person got picked up, questioned, and released. Sit with that for a second. In the immediate aftermath of the most politically charged assassination this country has seen in years, law enforcement had the wrong people in custody.
This was something that caused a lot of confusion that day. Two people were arrested in the immediate aftermath of this shooting. One of them was a man in his 70s named George Zinn, who allegedly yelled that he'd shot Kirk, was arrested. It was announced that a second person was also detained, but soon released. And Officer Bagley testified that when he went to the top of this building overlooking the amphitheater, he realized the shooting may have actually been the work of a sniper.
To me, when I got up there and I could see this disturbance in gravel, to me it looks like a sniper pad, a person that has been laying in a prone position, and you've got markings of elbows, knees, and feet to where somebody was in the line of sight of where Charlie's tent was. Then I realized that we probably didn't have our shooter in custody from that moment.
Not once, twice. Now here's where it gets interesting. It wasn't until Officer Bagley climbed up to a rooftop overlooking the whole courtyard that the real picture started to form. Disturbed gravel, marks in the shape of elbows, knees, feet, a sniper's nest. That's when it clicked for him, in his own words, that they probably didn't have their shooter in custody after all. Think about that. The actual moment law enforcement realized their first 2 arrests were wrong wasn't some brilliant detective work. It was one officer noticing scuff marks on a rooftop almost by accident. And you know what nobody wants to talk about? How thin the security actually was that day.
Do you know how many UVU officers you guys employ normally?
There was 15.
And do you know how many were assigned to cover that event that day?
That were assigned to cover it. There was 6 of us there was patrol 1 and then 5 others that were there with the chief.
Did you all have an idea there were going to be thousands and thousands of people there? Or was that a surprise to you?
Had an idea.
And you only had 5 officers?
6, yes.
6, I'm sorry, counting you, I was
Yes.
thinking. And of those 6 officers, are you all armed? Do you carry weapons?
Yes.
What type of weapons do you carry?
Glock, pistols.
Okay. And was there any use on campus of, I think they're called magnetometers, but the machines you walk through at TSA in the airport where it checks to see if you're carrying anything metal, what we all had to go through to get in the courtroom. Were there any machines like that set up or being used on campus that day?
No.
And as far as you know, were there any drones that were flying above campus that day?
Not that I know of.
And did anyone ever talk to you about covering anything near or on top of or in the Low C building? Were you ever assigned that area before the shooting?
No,
Do you know who was?
I don't.
And when you got up to the roof that afternoon, was anybody around that was law enforcement?
No.
Nobody on the roof?
No.
Nobody on the stairway?
No.
Nobody on the walkway?
No.
Under cross-examination, Bagley admitted something that should stop you cold. UVU normally staffs 15 officers. 15. For an event expected to draw thousands of people, many of them the exact kind of high-profile crowd that draws real threats, they had 6. 6 officers. No metal detectors. No magnetometers. The kind you and I walked through just to get into that courtroom to watch this hearing. No drones in the air. Nobody assigned to watch the one building that gave a clear line of sight straight to Kirk's tent. Nobody was watching the roof. Not one person. And look, I need you to really sit with that one, because it's not a conspiracy theory to ask how a nationally significant event, hosting a man who had received real threats before, ended up with less security than your average county fair. That's not paranoia. That's a fair question. A question institutions don't like answering. We'll come back to that. Because there's a bigger breadcrumb sitting right behind it. In the hours after the shooting, investigators say they found a bolt-action hunting rifle wrapped in a towel out in a wooded area. Cartridge casings nearby, engraved with messages, references tied to internet meme culture. Specific, deliberate, the kind of detail that tells you this wasn't some random act of chaos.
Makes me wonder, are they going to say it was such a chaotic event? Do we really know what was going on? In the hours after the shooting, law enforcement allegedly found this bolt-action hunting rifle wrapped in a towel in a wooded area as well as these cartridge cases that were reportedly engraved with words that were connected to memes and pop culture. Very, very specific. And the FBI announced that it was using facial recognition to try to track down the shooter. But when that proved to be unsuccessful, investigators then released surveillance photos of a person that they now claim is Tyler Robinson. And in around 36 hours after Kirk was killed, Robinson reportedly turned himself in. He was indicted on 7 counts, the most serious of which is aggravated murder. Several of the counts also have aggravating factors attached, like alleged targeting and committing a violent offense in the presence of a child. Now, importantly, Robinson has not entered a plea.
Somebody planned this. The FBI tried facial recognition first. It didn't work. So they released surveillance images instead, hoping the public would recognize the face. And it did. Roughly 36 hours after Charlie Kirk died, a 23-year-old named Tyler Robinson reportedly turned himself in. 7 counts. Aggravated murder, the most serious of them. Enhancements attached for alleged targeting and for committing a violent act in front of a child. He has not entered a plea. Let's be honest about that, because it matters. Under our system, and this matters more than ever right now, he is presumed innocent until a jury says otherwise. That's not weakness. That's the whole point of the system, even when every part of you wants to skip straight to the ending. But here's the part of this story that the mainstream coverage barely touched. And it's the part that actually deserves your attention. His name is Lance Twiggs.
The court, the judge, saw this recorded deposition of Lance Twiggs. This is Robinson's romantic partner. Now, Twiggs reportedly confirmed to officials that he sometimes went by the name Luna with certain friends and associates, including Robinson. And the Utah State Bureau of Investigation agent Brian Davis testified about these 2 interviews that Twiggs did with officials. Take a look.
And by the end of this hearing, he becomes the most important person in this entire case who isn't sitting at the defense table. Twiggs was Robinson's roommate. Then, according to his own testimony, something more. A romantic partner. Someone who, by his own account, sometimes went by the name Luna with people close to him, including Robinson. And it's Twiggs who ends up holding almost every piece of the emotional core of this case. Now here's a quiet moment. Just for a second, forget the courtroom. Forget the cameras. Imagine you're a 20-something kid and the person you love comes home the day after the biggest news story in the country and quietly confirms to you that yes, it was him. Imagine sitting with that.
I think it was 2023. I've known him longer than that, though. That was, I think, the first time I met him in person.
Okay. And will you describe your relationship with Tyler when you first met him anyway?
When I first met him, I didn't know him super well. He was just a new roommate, so I knew he knew my friend group, and I knew he liked playing games, but that's about it when we first, when he first moved in.
Okay. And then at some point, your relationship progressed to something more than just roommates, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
I think we started dating 2 or 3 months after he moved in.
Okay. What time did you get up on September 10th?
Probably like 12 to 1 p.m.
You didn't have to work that day?
No.
And did you hear from Tyler? Did he call or text you before then?
No, he sent that message in the group chat I mentioned, but he didn't message me directly at all that day.
Okay. When did you first hear from him on September 10th?
It was at 11 o'clock with that, automated message.
Okay, 11 p.m.?
Yeah.
He asks you here, remember how I was engraving bullets? Was he engraving bullets before this?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but he had said he was planning to go hunting with his family. And he asked me if we had a Dremel because he said he wanted to engrave messages on bullets. And I just told him where our Dremel was and told him to make sure he doesn't set off a bullet on accident in the house. But I didn't really think about it until then.
How long before September 10th was this that he asked about the Dremel?
I don't remember, because he'd been talking about the hunting/camping trip for a couple months. but I don't remember when he was specifically asking to engrave the bullets.
When did you first see him on September 11th? So this is the day after the shooting?
Yeah, I saw him when I woke up. Like I said, he was up and around doing a lot of stuff around the house. And then I think I saw him after that message where I said I'll come home and say I'm doing laundry, because I didn't want him going to my parents' house right then when he said there was probably cops outside. So I went back home, and it was just him there, and I said bye to him, and then he drove off. So I just went back to my parents' house.
So he acted erratically. Was he pacing? Was he just sitting down, relaxing?
No, he was walking around a lot.
Right, and that's within the home?
Mm-hmm.
And did he talk about what he had done?
Didn't go into detail. I just asked him in person if what he said was true the night before, and he said it was. I started crying a little bit and said he wishes he hadn't done it, and then kept
Not telling anyone. Not right away. Just carrying it. That's what Twiggs testified to. That when he asked Robinson directly if what he'd said the night before was true, Robinson confirmed it. And Twiggs said he started crying. Said Robinson told him, in his own words, that he wished he hadn't done it. That's a human being processing something almost nobody on this earth will ever have to process. And whatever you believe about Robinson, whatever your gut tells you about guilt or innocence here, Twiggs did not pull that trigger. He didn't play anything. He got handed a nightmare he never asked for, and then he got hauled in by the FBI, had his phone taken from him, was granted what's called use immunity so his own words couldn't be turned against him, and eventually left the state entirely, reportedly under federal protection.
Are you familiar with an individual named Lance Twiggs?
Yes, I am.
And who is he in regards to this investigation?
He's the roommate of Tyler Robinson.
Was he interviewed as part of this investigation?
He was.
How many times?
2 times.
When was the first time?
The first time was the early morning hours of September 12th, and that occurred at St. George Police Department.
Do you know if his phone was taken from him?
It was.
When did that happen?
So it was during that interview with FBI at St. George Police Department. They conducted an interview of him, and then he provided his phone. He did it voluntarily also, provided it to those agents.
And that would have been on September 12th, 2025?
Correct.
You mentioned a second interview of Mr. Twiggs? Okay, so for any statements made during the interview, they're given immunity for that, but they're not generally prohibited from being potentially prosecuted outside of that interview. Is that fair?
That's my understanding, yes.
Was Mr. Twiggs given use immunity?
Yes, he was.
The April 20th, 2026 interview was being taken in lieu of him having to come and testify at the preliminary hearing?
Yes, it was. Yes, he was.
This is somebody who never chose to be part of any of this. And you have to ask yourself, why does the story we all know, the headline version, barely mention him at all? Because here's the thing nobody talks about. The prosecution's entire narrative rests heavily on this one relationship. Twiggs' recorded deposition, taken back in April, was played in that courtroom instead of live testimony specifically because it was treated as a stand-in for him having to appear in person. The defense pushed back hard on that. If the state wants to use what this man said they argued put him on the stand, let us cross-examine him. Let the truth get tested the way it's supposed to be tested. The judge said no, not required at this stage. This is only about establishing probable cause, not proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And I get why that's the legal standard. I do. But just like I know that the second that video played, every major outlet ran with the same headline the next morning, Robinson confessed. Full stop. No caveats. No mention that this was recorded testimony never subjected to cross-examination. That's not journalism. That's a headline factory. Now let's talk about the messages because this is where it gets heavy. According to testimony read into the record, Robinson allegedly told Twiggs to check under his keyboard. There was a note there, one he'd reportedly photographed before it was burned. In it, Addressing Twiggs by the name Luna, he wrote that he was likely dead or facing years in prison, and that he'd had the chance to take out Charlie Kirk, and he took it. Read that again. He had the opportunity, and he took it.
But I do want to talk about something else. There was this letter that was apparently found underneath this keyboard, and Robinson had allegedly taken a photo of that note before it was eventually burned. And while the letter itself wasn't shown to the court, it was detailed in this search warrant, according to Utah outlet KSL-TV. And according to the warrant, the letter says, quote, Luna, if you're reading this per my text, then I am so sorry. I left the house this morning on a mission and sent an auto text. I am likely dead or facing a lengthy prison sentence. I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I took it. Now, KSL-TV also reports that Robinson allegedly sent a message to this group chat on the Discord app, which Rich and I have been talking about, reportedly saying, hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all this. I'm surrendering through a sheriff friend in a few moments. Thanks for all the good times and laughs. You've all been so amazing. Thank you all for everything.
That's not an accident. That's not a mistake made in a moment of panic. Those are the words of somebody who had already decided. And then there's the text exchange. Late that night, according to testimony, Twiggs asked him directly if he was the one who did it.
Yes. So this would have been from Tyler. It says, drop what you're doing, look under your keyboard.
And I apologize, let me stop you there. How do you know that that message would have been from Tyler Robinson?
That's just, so any of the messages in gray would be from Tyler, and messages in blue would be from Lance. It's just the way the iPhone distinguishes the messages. And also Lance in his interview also acknowledges that, who was saying what. And
up at the top, who do we see that this thread is between?
Tyler.
All right, sorry to interrupt you. So read that again, starting from look under the keyboard.
So after that, then Lance responds, he says, what? And then he says, you're joking, right? And then Tyler says, I tried to delete that.
If we could scroll down to page 2. And if you can continue reading along.
Okay. And Tyler says, I'm still okay, my love, but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you. And then Lance replies, you weren't the one who did it, right? And Tyler says, I am, I'm sorry. Lance says, I thought they caught the person.
Robinson's reply, in essence, was a confirmation, followed by an apology. Twiggs asked why. Robinson reportedly said he'd had enough of the man's hatred, that some things couldn't be negotiated out of a person.
And then Tyler says, no, they grabbed some crazy old dude and interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from the drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering.
If we could scroll down to page 3. Continue reading.
Lance says, why? And Tyler says, why did I do it? And Lance says, yeah. Tyler says, I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I'm able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything in the news about them finding it. We'll update you shortly, or sorry, we'll update you by midnight. And then Lance says, all right, stay safe. How long have you been planning this?
Scroll down a little bit, please, Kimberly.
And Tyler replies, a bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there is a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it.
We can scroll down to page 4 and continue reading about halfway down. I'll stop you about halfway down.
This is while they were a spot, but I don't want to chance it while they were parked there. If they'd found it, I imagine there would be more commotion. Again, I'm sorry for roping you into all of this. You shouldn't have to worry about this. And Lance replies, does anyone else know? Tyler says, not to my knowledge.
All right, I'll stop you there.
There's more in that exchange. Talk about the rifle left behind. Talk about a canine possibly sniffing it out. Talk about the engraved bullets being, in his own words, mostly a joke, a meme. And near the very end, one final instruction: delete this conversation.
Okay, so Lance says, was your change of clothes there, or was that also gone? Or did you bring those with you originally? Anyway, you could replace the gun, or would he notice? Then Tyler says, only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. I'll bet that canine sniffed it out. Little snitchy. Replace it, unlikely. I don't fully know what the gun was because it was old and Gramps did some modifying. There was a 4-digit serial on it. God only knows who it's registered to. Hopefully some dead guy who gave it to Grandpa. And he continues, remember how I was engraving bullets? The messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notices bulge UWU on Fox News, I might have a stroke.
And then continue. I'll stop you in a moment.
He says, all right, I'm going to have to leave it. That really sucks.
And let me stop you there. And then if we could go on to the next page, page 9. And do you see the first blue message we see on page 9? Can you start there?
Yes. So Lance says, do you need it for hunting? And Tyler says, no, my dad wanted to use a high caliber for the rifle hunt. Judging from today, I say Gramps' gun does just fine. IDK. I think that was a 2K scope. Lance says, geez. And then Tyler says, OMW home 3.5 hours. Lance says, drive safe. And then Tyler says, delete this exchange.
And I'll stop you right there.
Delete this conversation. Think about that phrase for a second. Somebody who just admitted to killing a man in front of thousands of witnesses is thinking clearly enough to worry about a digital paper trail. That's not somebody who snapped. That's somebody who was already 3 steps at planning his exit before he'd even fired the shot. And look, I need to be honest with you here, because this part actually gets to me. I've covered a lot of cases on this channel, a lot of darkness. But there's something about reading a private, almost tender exchange between two people who loved each other and watching it get read out loud in open court, in front of cameras, in front of the whole world. That feels like its own kind of violation. Twiggs never asked for this, and now his most private moment of grief is a court exhibit forever. That's the cost nobody talks about when a case becomes this big. Somebody always gets caught in the blast radius who never did anything wrong. But let's push forward, because there's a bigger question sitting underneath all of this, and it's the one this whole hearing was really supposed to answer, whether anyone admits it or not. Is this enough to shut down every theory swirling around this case? The fall guy theory, the patsy theory, the idea that some larger hand was pulling strings behind Tyler Robinson. Is the evidence enough to put all of that to rest? And the honest answer, even from people inside that courtroom, was no, not because the evidence isn't strong. It clearly is. Multiple alleged confessions, DNA, a note, text messages, engraved casings matched to a tool found in his own apartment.
That were apparently found at this crime scene had engravings. And these were specific messages. And they have linked it, or potentially linked it, to this Dremel tool that was apparently found at Tyler Robinson's home. It had, they also apparently found the same kind of ammunition at the shooting scene in his home. I actually spoke to Joseph Scott Morgan about that, and he thinks that there's going to be a specific expert to match the engravings to handwriting, which I think is really interesting. But that's something I don't even know if is getting that much attention, right? The engravings on the casings, on top of, like you said, the surveillance, the DNA, the potential confessions. I thought that was interesting too.
It is interesting, and it's not quite, it doesn't have quite the oomph of the confession or the DNA evidence, so it doesn't get the same attention. But certainly the circumstantial evidence, if you just look at it as circumstantial evidence, there were engravings on the casings, and then you found in his apartment similar casings and engraving equipment. That circumstantial evidence that coupled with some other evidence could get you to probable cause. Now, if Joseph Scott Morgan, who you and I both know and trust is right about the evidence at trial, maybe they can match that up even more clearly, and that would help meet the burden of proof at trial.
That's not a thin case. That's a mountain of it. But conspiracy theories don't die because of evidence. They die because people stop being curious. And as long as there's a family grieving in public, a defendant who barely shows emotion in the courtroom, and a justice system that moves at the speed of bureaucracy instead of the speed of trust, there will always be somebody out there saying the official story doesn't add up. Here's the one thread even the legal experts covering this admitted gave them pause. Twiggs testified that he and Robinson never once talked about Charlie Kirk.
What about Charlie Kirk? Did he ever talk about Charlie Kirk?
I personally had never heard him talk about Charlie Kirk before specifically.
Okay. How about political issues? So did you ever talk about gender identity issues and LGBTQ rights?
Not politics around him specifically, not the debates, not the controversy, never came up. And they never discussed gender identity or LGBTQ issues either, subjects that so much of the public narrative around motive has centered on. Sit with that. If none of that ever came up between the two people closest to each other in the world, then where did this supposedly come from? A grievance this specific, this violent, that apparently never once surfaced in conversation with the person he was sleeping next to every night? That's not proof of anything sinister. Let's be honest about that too. People hide things from the people they love all the time, especially the darkest parts of themselves. But it is the one loose thread that a defense attorney could actually pull on at trial. And you already knew there'd be one. You always know there's one. Now, let's talk about the family, because this is the part that broke something open in me. Erica Kirk's own representative stood up in that courtroom and did something almost nobody does. Argued for more transparency, not less.
Open court, they were represented by their own attorney in this case, but Judge Tony Graff ruled against that motion.
I've been very hesitant to speak up at these proceedings. We understand it's the state, the defense, and the judge. You're all doing your job. But I feel as if we need to. I want to be clear as to what the Kirk's family's position is on all of this. The Kirk family believes strongly that if the evidence is being admitted in this preliminary hearing, it should be made public for the world to see. No redactions. This court has tools at its tools at its disposal to make sure the defendant receives a fair trial. You'll use them if you find that you need to. That's it, Your Honor. To not be transparent here, to not be open, to not let the world see what happened, will create doubt and distrust in the judicial system. And that's not what anybody wants. That's not what any of us believe should happen here. And we'd ask the court to consider the position of the family in making its ultimate decision.
Part of the reason in responding to the media, and it's an important point, and to the representative for victim representative Erica Kirk, is I recognize the importance of transparency, and it is a fine line. I'm balancing all these competing rules, the constitutional rights, as well as transparency, and sometimes it is an imperfect balancing act, but I'm trying to act in the interest of justice in making this balancing act, and for transparency to actually be transparent.
Ask the judge to release everything. No redactions, no sealed portions. Let the world see it all, because anything less breeds distrust in the system. Think about how rare that is. Most victims' families want protection from having to relive the worst day of their lives in public. This family stood up and said, "Show everyone. Let there be no room left for doubt." And the judge said no, not entirely. Some parts would remain sealed in the name of protecting the defendant's right to a fair trial. Now here's a question worth sitting with quietly, honestly. Whose interest is actually being protected when a grieving widow asks for total transparency and gets told no? Is it really about protecting Robinson's right to an impartial jury? Or is it about an institution that has never fully trusted the public with the whole truth, even when the victim's own family is begging for it? I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know the answer. I don't. But you already feel the same unease I do when you hear a judge tell a grieving widow's attorney that transparency has to be balanced, has to be managed, has to be filtered through the court's judgment of what the public can handle. That's the sentence that should bother you more than almost anything else in this entire hearing. Now let's talk about where this goes next, because that's the question everybody's actually asking underneath all of this. Legal experts watching this case, people who've sat through hundreds of these hearings, say there's essentially no doubt this moves to trial. The standard here isn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just probable cause, and by every account, that bar has been cleared many times over. But here's the quiet reality nobody's saying loudly enough. There's a real chance this never actually makes it to a jury, because somewhere behind closed doors, prosecutors and defense attorneys are almost certainly already talking about a plea deal.
Yeah, I think they're doing briefing and argument in September, so you're not going to get a decision probably till October. I think there's a pretty good chance there'll be a plea negotiation. We've talked about this before. There's always a plea negotiation. And the question to me is, are the prosecutors willing to take the death penalty off the table in exchange for a guilty plea?
You think they are?
Right.
You think they would in this case?
I don't know, because this case is so politically charged. There's that whole element of it that takes it out of the ordinary. In a case like this is a single murder case by a young person. So to me, it is the kind of case where you would take the death penalty off the table if you could get a guilty plea and a life prison sentence. That would seem to me to be a fair exchange. It would save you the cost and burden and risk of a trial. It would save the family from having to go through all of that again. It would get finality. It would get an adequate punishment. And I'm not a death penalty person anyway. I don't love the death penalty anyway, so I'm a little bit jaded by that. But to me, that would be a fair exchange. I just don't know, because of the circumstances of this case, because of everything behind the scenes, if that's something the prosecutors
take the death penalty off the table, get a guaranteed guilty plea and a life sentence, and spare everyone, the family, the jury, the public, the trauma of sitting through a trial that reopens this wound all over again. And I'll be honest with you, part of me understands that logic completely. Sparing a family from having to relive this in agonizing detail for months, maybe years, has real human value. But another part of me, the part that remembers how political this whole case has become, wonders if prosecutors even have the room to make that call quietly. This isn't just a murder case anymore. It's a symbol. And symbols don't get quiet plea deals. They get trials. Because somebody, somewhere, decides the public needs to watch this play out to completion. We'll know more come September, when briefing and arguments are scheduled. A decision on whether this actually proceeds to trial likely won't land until October. Months from now. Months where the story stays half finished, hanging in that uncomfortable space between accusation and resolution.
So look, right now we're recording this before the preliminary hearing wraps up. It's supposed to wrap up today, one more day of evidence, but this decision from Judge Graff, it's probably not going to come down right away. There's more arguments, there's briefing as we talked about. Those are scheduled for September. We can get an answer after that. But look, my legal opinion, Rich's legal opinion, it seems this case is going to move forward towards trial. It does become a question, what does Robinson decide to do next? Rich Schoenstein.
And that gap, that waiting, that's exactly where every theory, every whisper, every piece of doubt gets to keep breathing. So here's where I land on all of this, and I want you to really hear me on this last part. The evidence against Tyler Robinson as it stands right now is heavy, it is detailed. It is, by any honest measure, damning. A note, text messages, a confession to the person he loved most, DNA, physical evidence matched to items in his own home.
What stands out to you? What are the pieces of evidence that you say, my gosh, I mean, there is sufficient probable cause to support these charges?
Multiple alleged confessions.
Those are the
tracking of his whereabouts in a manner that seems consistent with him having been in the area. Some DNA evidence, but really multiple alleged confessions would get you probable cause.
And I want to get to that in a minute when we talk about Lance Twiggs, but the DNA I find to be fascinating. You know, they talk about how there is DNA linking him on the towel, on the trigger of the bolt action rifle, right? Potentially the casings. Now you hear the defense fighting back about that. They say, well, wait a minute, you know, it's not definitively him. Could it be touch DNA? They may have something to say, well, why is Lance Twiggs' DNA also on the towel? You're getting a semblance also of what the defense may argue if this goes to trial, right? What do you make of those counter arguments regarding the DNA?
So I think those are good arguments at trial. If this was a DNA only case, I think it might be a bit of an uphill battle. I think the defense would be in it at trial. I still think there'd be probable cause, but I think the defense could have something to say about that and cast enough reasonable doubt that the DNA gets you there to sort of deal with that part of the case.
This isn't a thin, circumstantial case built on guesswork, but strong evidence and full transparency are not the same thing, and this week proved that. A security failure nobody wants to fully own, a victim's family begging for openness and getting told no, a key witness's testimony played on a screen instead of tested under real cross-examination, a defendant who sat there silent, unrateable, while the worst night of somebody else's life got read out loud like a court exhibit. None of that erases the evidence. But all of it should make you ask why, in a case this important, this public, this consequential, we're still being handed the truth in careful, managed pieces instead of all at once. You already knew that going in. You didn't need me to tell you that institutions manage narratives instead of just telling us the truth straight. You've watched this happen before, in other cases with other names, other headlines. This is just the latest version of the same old stored up in new evidence. So I'll leave you with this. If the family of the victim is standing up in open court begging for full transparency, and the system tells them no, what exactly is left to hide? And who decided that we, the public, the people who watched this man die in broad daylight in front of thousands of witnesses, don't get to know everything to tell what you think? Tell me if you trust what's coming out of that courtroom, or if, like me, something about all of this still doesn't sit right. Put it in the comments below. I want to know exactly where you land on this, because this case is far from over, and something tells me we haven't heard the last uncomfortable truth from that courtroom yet.